I won't go into cemeteries at night. It's been a long-standing rule of mine. I believe spirits have more power and presence after dark, and that we need to respect it as their time. Invading the space dedicated to them during peak hours, so to speak, is just asking for trouble. I've been susceptible to strange things since I was a little girl. For a year or two after my grandmother passed away, I could still see her sitting at the foot of my bed, or wandering in the garden. It never scared me. On the contrary, I found it comforting to know she was watching over us. As I grew up, I saw things less and less, but felt them all the time. That's why when my partner and I went on a Valentine's Day ghost tour that included stopping off at a cemetery, I opted to stay by the gate. The rest of our group walked toward a supposedly haunted mausoleum. I didn't budge. The tour guide begged me to fall in line for safety reasons, so I relented. Just as well. Our trek through the cemetery was uneventful and the tour itself rather corny. When I got home, however, something felt off. In the weeks following, my partner and I fell into petty arguments over everything. Not a habit for us. During our fights, it was as if the room became darker, the shadows closing in like something was egging us on, feeding off the negativity. More than once, I stopped to ask, why are we even fighting about this? And suddenly, it was as if a light had been switched on. The spell would break, and neither of us would be able to remember what the fuss was about. We would see unaccountable shadows in the hall and bathrooms. The dogs would growl at nothing. The feeling of being watched made our skin crawl day and night. The doors of empty rooms would slam. Objects would disappear and turn up in unusual places almost daily. The tipping point was my sleep talking. My partner would wake up in the middle of the night to find me staring at him. Though I seemed focused and wide awake, I was anything but. Sometimes I would talk to him and tell him things that I had done to hurt other people, or things I wanted to do. Luckily, when he tried to wake me in these instances, I would snap out of it, with no memory of what I'd done. I asked a friend's husband to bless me, after which the sleep-talking stopped. We wafted sage through the house and tried multiple binding or cleansing rituals, hoping to compel whatever had followed us home from the cemetery to leave. Eventually, we bound the entity in a guest room closet. Better than nothing, I suppose. For months afterwards, the room felt heavy and unwelcoming. Any time I pulled sheets or winter coats from the guest room closet, I would be overcome with dizziness and had to leave for fear of getting sick. The chunk of rose quartz I'd placed on the closet shelf would almost always have found its way to the floor outside, as if tossed in defiance. And on one occasion, I distinctly heard a low growl rumbling from the back corner. My partner's daughter would stay with us from time to time. After everything that had been going on, I was hesitant to have her spend the weekend, knowing she'd have to stay in the guest room. She was 10 years old, with already one negative paranormal experience under her belt. She stayed with us despite my misgivings. That Sunday, as I went to collect her things, I was shocked. I walked in, steeled for the sickening feeling I'd grown to expect, and felt nothing. The room was bright and calm. The lingering energy had vanished. Even the closet felt peaceful. I turned and saw my dachshund nearby, staring at nothing and wagging her tail. She play-bowed and rolled on her back, clearly asking for tummy rubs, then happily trotted out of the room. I told my partner this later. He smiled and told me his grandfather's spirit stays around his daughter, and that the man had had an affinity for small dogs. I'll never know if this was what finally pushed the unwanted entity out, but I'm grateful. And I've learned my lesson. No more cemeteries after dark.
Hi, I'm Jamie Markey.
And I'm Michael Tatum. And this
is School Intentions.
I'm trying not to get overly excited because I know it's a point of...
He long distance high-fived me.
I did.
It was amazing. We're very proud of ourselves.
We're getting this down.
We are. We're doing such a good job at saying our names.
It's harder than you think.
It is.
That's our name.
Who wrote that story?
That comes from Emily.
That was such a good story.
It's really, really good.
And accurate. Don't fucking go into a cemetery at night.
I feel like you and Emily can hang out because
we know
you're not
what's
gonna
up.
Go to the places where you're just no fun. You don't want to go in the woods.
No.
That's on record. You don't want to. You don't want to go to cemeteries after dark.
don't want to do it.
Anywhere else you won't go? Abandoned buildings?
Abandoned buildings, nope, not happening.
I'm kind of with you on the abandoned buildings, though. Those freak me out. I had a partner once, years ago, who loved to go to abandoned buildings to get photos. And he was really good at taking those photos, but I was like, it's illegal and risky. And
the floors are going to cave in and you're going to crash down and die.
Yeah. And I'm like, is it worth the shot?
Right.
And he'd always say, yes, of course. And I guess I respect the dedication to his art, but I didn't want to be around there when, you don't
want to be the sacrifice.
I didn't want to be at the table when the check came. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. I'm just uninterested. Even when I was a kid, there was this old abandoned factory that people would go in all the time, and every year one or two kids would die because they fell through the roof or fell through a higher floor to the lower floors. And there were homeless people that lived in there, and vagrants and probably drug deals and all kinds of
that's the biggest reason for me not to go in there is
it never even became an option for me to go into that building. And people, it was, we should go into, no.
You're like, no, in fact, I'm telling.
No, I'm not doing that. So in the horror movies where there's the one person that's the mothering one that's like, this is stupid.
That's you.
That's me.
You're like, this is how we die, guys.
Right.
This is how the side characters all die.
Yes. And I am not going to be a part of this film. I'm going home.
I'm going to make my own romantic comedy.
Something. It's going to be comedy, though, for sure.
What's the title for today's episode?
Today's title comes from, I believe it's Cornelia Funke. Funke. Like
German
funky,
name, yes.
but Funke. Yes, she's a German writer. She wrote Inkheart, the Inkheart series.
Oh, okay.
It's so good.
I've heard of it. I really should get to it.
It's so good. The title is A Fear You Cannot Name. And the line itself is such a good line. Nothing is more frightening than a fear you cannot name.
Ooh.
Based upon what you're talking about, what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we got some good ones today.
It's weird that our title is based upon things we're talking about. I don't even know why I said that. Obviously, it is.
What are the chances?
I know. So this week for me,
what are you doing? I'm so excited.
I got distracted watching, because we talked about it in the last Ghostacles episode. We were watching these videos of spooky videos and stuff like that.
And ghosts caught on film, stuff like that.
Yes, and who we were watching, we didn't even mention him. Is Nuke's Top 5? Is that what it is? Nukes. We both really like his voice. He's not trying to sell you on the spook. He lets the spook
he's supernatural and just he's very natural. He's super natural.
You said it. I heard it.
Totally is an unintentional pun, which is now going to be a t-shirt.
Yeah. Right.
He's really natural and just engaging. I like his voice, and he's man, he must scour the web for these videos, because a lot of them are very I wouldn't call them obscure. Well, yeah, they're obscure. I don't know where the hell he finds them.
I haven't seen them all before.
I haven't. It's really hard to find stuff we haven't seen.
Right.
Because this is what we use the internet for.
Right. And he edits them really well. So he puts music behind them, and it's nice and subtle. It's not overpowering. And he's just natural. He's not trying to sell you on the spookiness with his voice being spooky, which normally, is a fail. And my least favorite thing is when they do the computerized voice. Sorry if you do the computer.
It's offensive to voice actors to hear.
That's probably what it is. Just on a fundamental level. It's there are people who could read that successfully.
Right. It's also just like the uncanny valley when you hear that voice going, "Hello, welcome to this place." You're like,
don't like it. It's not my jam.
You sound like a person, but you don't sound like a person.
Exactly.
Anyway, but Nuke's Top 5 is a really cool channel.
Really
There's all kinds of creepy stuff on there. A lot of it's like ghost video or ghost footage.
The only thing is it'll be Top 5 ghosts caught on camera, but there's 40 different videos of the top. So I sometimes get those confused. That would be my complaint. But
what else are you going to call it? New Top 5. Okay, right. Top 40.
The other top 5. Billboard. The other top 5.
But they're really good, and he's a really good presenter, content provider.
Yes,
so
very much.
Check him out.
We like him a lot.
I hope to meet him one day.
Yes, and so there was one video, and I can't remember what it was, but there were all of these cops that had gone to this house, and I believe was in Mexico, and it starts kind of with this interview with a cop who said that he had gone into the house, they'd received a call, and I think he's speaking in Spanish, and they had gone in and saw stuff flying in the house.
Mm.
And as he was leaving, a knife flew across the room, thrown by unseen hands, and hit him in the back. And he said if it wasn't for his bulletproof vest, he probably would have been hurt
Oh.
by the knife. And so you see this video of all of these cops standing outside, and they've got their phones up and they're trying to take pictures of the
Uh-huh.
house, and you can see something fly across the room inside the house at one point, and almost everybody's out.
Oh.
And it was just it would be, and I believe the church was involved as well. So if it was a hoax, it would be a hoax by the family, the church, and the police.
And there's something about people in positions of authority, particularly law enforcement, when they say something's gone down, like I tend to believe it more than if it's a civilian.
Well, yeah, because they have to do
depending on the
paperwork.
civilian, of course.
They have to do paperwork about it.
Yeah, well, and they see shit. They see some shit.
Yes.
So for anything to stand out, it has to be pretty goddamn amazing.
Exactly. And I know
amazing maybe isn't the best word.
The movie Veronica. It's another Spanish-speaking film, I think, and it's based upon a case that a guy had that he had to file all this paperwork on, and it's his notes about how he walked into a house and I think he saw this girl levitating and all this kind of stuff. And so the movie is based upon that. It's a great movie, though. It's really nice and creepy.
Well, and they're trained observers. I mean, that's part of their thing. Is like part of your job is to look so you can be as impartial as humanly possible, because this is probably going to come up in court.
Yeah. Well, and I think we expect them, along with firefighters and nurses, and but in this case, first responders in particular, they're trained to deal in emergency situations and know a solution.
Yes.
And when they don't have one because they don't know what's going on,
there's some shit happening.
And I love it.
It's so compelling.
I love reading about it.
Is this what you're doing? Is this what you're doing today?
Yes. So I'm not doing the history of anything. No hysteria, but I am just going to read a bunch of stories that cops have told.
You're doing a buffet of
I'm doing
law enforcement.
A buffet.
I love it.
Of law enforcement stories.
I love it.
There's a whole bunch of them. I pared it down.
I just cartoon laughed.
But it's still so excited. I know. Okay, are you ready?
No, but that's why I want to do it.
All right. First.
Okay.
Now this one, just a trigger warning. It does mention rape and some other things, so just be ready for that.
Thank you for the warning.
I'm starting with the harsh one. I'm a detective and spent some time as an expert on sex crimes and crimes against children. It was the best/worst assignment I've had. One case I had came in at midnight. A young woman with a toddler comes in to one of the precincts to report her ex-boyfriend raped her during a custody argument.
Oh, God.
Long story short, it was legit and one of the most violent and sadistic cases I've ever had, so I'll spare the gruesome details.
Ugh.
I still have no idea how this woman made her own way to a precinct with a toddler. Part of the investigation requires me to talk to the toddler. Victim said the toddler was present for everything.
Oh my God.
I'm a child forensic interviewer as well. During the interview, the toddler recalls their father becoming angry and hitting the mom. Then the toddler said that the nice woman showed up and she couldn't see past the nice woman. The nice woman held her and told her they were both going to be safe and sang her a song in a different language. The toddler said the nice woman went over to the front door and knocked on the door. Then the nice woman helped them and their mom to the car before flying away.
Oh, okay.
In the victim's interview, she said that her ex-boyfriend had a knife to her throat and put it to the skin to cut her throat open, but he got distracted for some reason, then ran out of the apartment. She had no explanation why. The suspect was caught about 8 hours later. He confessed to absolutely everything. When I asked him about the knife to the throat, he said this: I swear to God I was going to cut the bitch's throat open, but I thought I heard a knock at the door and thought it was the police. Once I saw it was clear, I ran outside. He is now serving life in prison, and the mom and toddler are safe and doing well. I'd love to know more about the nice woman.
Hell yeah. Oh, thank you, nice woman.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So
God, I don't even know how to comment on that.
I know. Of course, there's always people who can say, they're dealing with it in a certain way, but when the knocking on the door,
but when there's actually external, thing that something
kind of elevates the story quite a bit. And so I got these from Reddit and Ranker, which Ranker is basically Reddit stories anyway. So that's where I got all these from.
Okay.
I went deep.
Wow. Oh,
Okay.
oh,
I remember this number 2.
number 2.
I remember my father telling me a story when he was a police officer in New Hampshire. One night, dispatch gets a call from someone reporting to have seen a little girl wandering around a lake by herself. That night, my father was on duty, and every available police officer responded to try and find this little girl. My father was the first to arrive with his partner. As they exit their car, they slowly start to walk towards the lake. As they near the water, my father's partner hits him on the shoulder and points towards the lake. And there stands this little girl. My father said when he turned to see her standing in the water, and every hair on the back of his neck stood up once he saw her. It was 2 a.m. and in November, so it was very cold outside. He said she was in a white nightgown with no shoes, standing in the water. They both look at each other, knowing that something wasn't right about the situation. They report to dispatch that they found the girl. They walk a little closer, and my father kneels down and holds his arms out and calls for the girl to come to him. The little girl then turns her attention to my father and slowly starts to walk towards him from out of the water. As this is happening, another unit pulls up to witness this girl walking up to my father. Just as the little girl is within 8 feet of my father, she disappears, and there was nothing left but tiny little footprints in the dirt. They all stand there in disbelief, trying to figure out what just happened. And one of the police officers turns and says, "How the fuck are we going to explain this?"
That's a legit reaction.
Uh-huh.
How the fuck? What? How? The paperwork, like
Little bitches in white.
they're not even.
How do you?
There's not even boxes on the form for this.
I know. How do you explain that?
Like, well,
Do they all have to do the paperwork for that, or just one of them?
They all have to.
That's incredible.
I presume. I mean, because here's the thing. Like, I wonder. God, I wonder. I wish somebody out there has to be able to answer this. That's a listener, I hope. But I would like to know: does the paperwork that law enforcement officials have to fill out, does it accommodate bizarre shit like this?
Right.
Like, is there an other box that you can check? And if so, like, what are next steps? Like, are there paragraphs on the form?
Is there a space to write in
like,
supernatural?
Was it a UFO? Was it a ghost? Did subject disappear?
Right.
Like, I want to know. Like,
in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I'd want to know if the paperwork, accounts for that eventuality, because it happens clearly.
Yeah. Well, and
that's so great.
The other thing that gets me about this too is both of them, as they got there, were like, and they saw her, were like, something's not right. I mean, obviously something that's not right, but because there's a little girl, but there's just something else.
Well, and we know from experience, when you see something, when you see an apparition, there's something about, kind of like hearing, an electronic voice, or seeing a robot that's supposed to look like a person, the uncanny valley effect. There's just something that you're like, this isn't what is this? This isn't what it looks like.
Yeah.
There's something in the back of our minds that
sometimes there's not. And you, it's just a person.
It's only
it's
afterwards
just a
that you
fucking
realize.
person. Yeah, but yeah.
Ooh.
So crazy. Crazy.
Okay. Man, these are good. I love
them.
They're
so good.
Oh God. Okay.
Police officer working the desk, 1500 to 2300. Fire alarm signals goes off. Many years ago, the police department offered alarm monitoring service, still had 10 to 12 places that were hardwired, and it would require pulling apart a lot of equipment to disconnect the system, so we just kept it going. First shift dispatch is already punched in, so she took it. I'm headed out the door to the fire department when 911 rings from the same address. I answer it. No one on the other end. Assumed they barely got to call before passing out. I bolt out the back door, hop in a squad car, radio in the 911 call on channel 3 that both police and fire can hear, and then I'm going directly to the house. Arrive just as another unit shows up. No signs of smoke, no signs of anything. Older woman comes walking up the street, pushing a wheelchair with an elderly lady, her mother. They live there and just went out for an early evening stroll before dinner. Tell them what we have going on. Nobody else lives there, and as far as the elderly lady can remember, the alarm was disconnected from the house years ago during some renovations. They don't have any alarm system either, just a couple of smoke fire detectors.
Okay.
Yeah. We do a walk around the house, get to the back door of the kitchen, and you can clearly see and smell gas. We turned off the gas at the main, set up some fans to air it out, and find a cracked gas line going to the oven. Daughter said she spilled some coffee she was making for their walk and had to move the oven a few inches to clean, probably broke the line pushing the oven back in. Nothing else in the house is disturbed, and both phones are on the hook. Fire chief shows up about 15 minutes into the call. He goes over to the two ladies and gives them both a hug. He's nearly in tears. The elderly lady in the wheelchair, her husband was the fire chief 60 plus years ago for our department. Their daughter, her husband, passed away a few years ago. He was also a member of our department. Never believed in ghosts or spirits, but that call made me think maybe people who spend their lives doing good are allowed by some power to look over their loved ones every so often. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm going to tear up at that
I
one.
know, it's so good.
Oh.
It's so good. Like, where's the 911 phone call come from? Why is this alarm going off for no reason?
I've heard stories similar too.
Yeah.
About like someone just like the old lady whose apparent, deceased husband was calling so that the EMTs would be there before
Yes.
she had an issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I almost read that one, but I didn't because I felt like.
Oh, you know the story?
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Yeah, and then they look and the guy's waving. They see a guy waving and they go look and there's nobody in there.
Yeah.
And then he describes the guy to the woman when she's in the hospital.
She's like,
That's my husband. Yeah.
He died like last year or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So good. I love it.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay.
A friend's father is a police officer in one of the larger villages.
In one of the larger villages. He's
There's
a police
a very
officer
large
inside
villager.
a villager.
That's how large the villager is.
He's got his own zip code.
Yes. Hey, no shame.
No.
Larger villages of Illinois. He and his partner were working night shift when they were called to investigate a suspected break-in at the local morgue. They arrived to find the custodian waiting for them out front. The custodian said that he'd been mopping one of the corridors and had seen something move in his peripheral vision. He looked up and saw a person quickly cross from one side of the hallway to the other. He couldn't tell much about the person as he'd been turning the lights off as he worked his way through the building, just a dim outline, but enough to be sure of what he'd seen. He was unarmed, so called the police and stepped outside to wait. My friend's dad and his partner entered the morgue. They started off by calling out to anyone who might be inside. No answer. Then began to do a sweep, walking down the central corridor with their hands on their guns, checking each room to the side, occasionally calling out for any intruder to show themselves. My friend's dad came upon a room with a light off, pitch black inside. He fumbled for the switch and flicked it. The room lit up. Nothing but an empty waiting room for relatives of the dead. He heard his partner call out, "Hey, stop, turn around." Friend's dad swung back out into the corridor, and his partner had unholstered his gun, was pointing it at the end of the long corridor. He said, "She went around that corner." Then the custodian said, "She's trapped. No exits that way." They had the custodian lock himself into the waiting room for safety. Then they advanced down the corridor, calling to the woman to show herself that they wouldn't hurt her. This time, my friend's dad reached the end first, and with his back to the wall, peered around the corner. The woman was standing by a big gray door. Lights were off here too, so it was hard to see her clearly, but he could see she wasn't holding a gun, had long, fair hair. He stepped out from behind the corner to talk to her, but she opened the door, disappeared into the dark inside, and shut it firmly behind her. He sprinted up to the door and pulled at the handle. Locked. Banged on it for a while and called out to her, but no answer. The door had a deadlock on it, so his partner brought over the custodian to unlock it. They turned on their flashlights to see better. The custodian rounded the corner and faltered a little. "This door? You sure? This door doesn't lock from the inside." The custodian found the right key and carefully turned it in the lock. Click. "We're coming in. Have your hands up." They entered the room, flashlights illuminating every corner. The custodian hit the light switch and the room lit up. It was empty, except for some equipment against the wall and two gurneys in the middle of the room. One was empty, and one was covered in a sheet with what appeared to be a body underneath it. Nice hiding spot. My friend's dad approached, and it was the smell that first spooked him. It smelled like a corpse. He pulled the sheet down, and there the woman lay, straggly light brown hair all around her face. The tag on her toe said she'd died 4 days ago.
Oh.
Friend's father is a devout Christian, so does not believe in ghosts or the supernatural even now, doesn't know what to make of this event.
Oh my God.
I know.
Fucking belongs in a horror movie.
I know.
That's some
it's
horror
so
movie
good.
shit right there.
It's so good. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
And so
my
on
God.
this was one of the ones on Reddit where they're like, hey, cops out there, tell us your most supernatural stories or whatever. They have creepy stories too, and those are dark.
Oh, I
Um,
bet.
but the supernatural stories are where a lot of these are from.
Oh, oh my
Okay.
God.
I know,
Oh,
it's so good.
God.
I love that one.
Oh,
I love that one.
it's broad daylight outside while we record this, and
I
it
know,
might
I
as
keep
well be
getting
midnight.
goosebumps.
Chicken skin.
Goosebumps. I was a deputy sheriff for 13 years, and the majority of that time I worked in a large jail with a big population. I was a team leader of the tactical response team that roamed the hallways and responded to all the emergencies that would arise, not just fights, but medical emergencies too. We had a set of cells in the admissions area that were isolation cells for inmates who just got there and were problems, either mentally or physically. I responded one night to a guy who took his pants off and tried hanging himself in the cell. He had a really good attempt and had to be rushed to the hospital. When we reviewed the camera footage to assist with our report, all you noticed was him standing quietly in the cell for minutes, looking at the camera. The camera glitches out, and when it comes back on, he's hanging himself. The next 3 days in the same cell, we had similar incidents. One guy was successful in bashing his head into the wall so hard it killed him.
Oh, fuck.
But every time we would watch the tapes, the guy would be standing there, watching the camera minutes before the attempt, and then the camera glitches. To this day, cell 3 still freaks me out. Makes me think there was an entity in that cell causing people to kill themselves.
Ooh. Oh.
Just the idea of someone staring at the camera, then it glitching, and then you see them.
These are all such great fucking
I know.
scenes from horror movies.
I know.
I'm already writing scripts in my head.
I know.
Oh
I know.
my God. Oh,
This is why there are so many of them. I
no
can't help
shit.
myself.
These are great.
Yeah, okay. My brother is a deputy, and at the time I worked as an EMT for a few small towns in northeast Colorado. I frequently went on rides along with him while waiting for 911 calls to come in. This took place in Amherst, Colorado. The town is very small. Amherst has about 50 people, a church, some houses, a grain tower, and a park. It was about 3 a.m., and we were about to call it a night. As we were making our last check on Amherst, we noticed movement at the park, but couldn't tell exactly what was going on because it was pitch black. We drove up and stopped alongside the dirt road, flipped on the spotlight, and as we moved the light around the park, it finally settled on the back of a young girl, maybe 13, sitting on a swing with her back facing us. We left the spotlight on her, and she wasn't moving. She just sat there facing away from us, looking down at the ground. Needless to say, it was a very creepy situation. We both looked at each other with that face you would make when something is out of the ordinary. I quickly suggested that we should call her over using the PA system. He agreed. As we looked back over, she was gone. I mean, no signs of anyone anywhere.
Oh, no.
The park was in a wide open area. She couldn't have gotten out of sight in the amount of time that we had our exchange of words. I remember saying, should we get out and look for her? Maybe she hid behind one of the park toys or something. My brother just looked at me and said, hell to the no, and drove away. It still creeps me out to this day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So good.
Oh, God. Oh, I
know.
love it. I love
Mhm.
Jamie. This is so good. I'm like, oh my God.
I know.
It's freaking me out, and it's getting the creative juices flowing. I'm
I
like,
know. It's
oh,
so good.
hey, I've got ideas for
Yeah.
a short film now.
Well, and I wonder how often that happens where they are like, what is going on over here? And they see someone and then that person just disappears. What do you do?
Have you seen the footage? It's a dash cam footage from years ago now, of cops chasing a car, and it's a high speed chase, and the squad car is like on this person's ass, like
Yeah.
they are doing a hell of a job keeping up with them, and at some point you can see them the whole time. They never leave view, and it's really dramatic looking because I cannot myself figure out how this could have been faked, but at some point the car you only see the taillights of, like, takes a sharp turn, like clearly to try to get the fuck away from them, and the cop follows and
It's
stops.
a field, right?
And there's a chain link goddamn fence
Yeah.
between the cop car, the hood of the cop car, and
Yes.
and the taillights that keep on going. And how the fuck that car got through there, because they I guess they showed the whole area, like there's no opening there, there's nothing, it's just a big fucking fence. Nothing. It wasn't like disconnected. Like it's not
Mhm.
like they could have gone underneath it as though it were a curtain or something like that. It
Right.
was it was just a fucking fence, and the car had no problem going through it. It's a really dramatic piece of footage. As far as I know, no one's debunked it.
Yeah, I've seen that. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
it's really like what the how the what the
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it just makes me think how often that happens. How often that
I
must
mean, it must
happen with,
happen a lot. I mean, there's a
yeah.
lot of cops out there
Well,
that are on the
especially when
job
you
all the
think
time, and
too,
they must answer calls,
yeah.
all night.
Uh-huh.
So,
And then you think too about how many people see phantom hitchhikers or,
mhm,
what things that are not there on the highways,
yeah.
people walking, things like that. How many cops are called out to those scenes to nothing,
Oh,
or they see something and then
I
it's
want to
just
know
like,
what the
well, yeah.
paperwork looked like. I want to
I want to know what
know.
the
I want to
paperwork
know what
looks like
boxes there are that
too.
you can check that say, yeah, hitchhiker was a phantom, or something. Like there's got
Right.
to be. Oh, oh,
Right. Maybe
just
there's
want to
just a
know.
box that was like, out of my jurisdiction. That's just what they all are. UFO, out of my jurisdiction.
Beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cop, real call. I've been on patrol for several years and I love stuff like this. I had a backup officer with me who witnessed everything. Dispatch sent me to a call in a mountain area late one night. Dispatch said the caller reported several people holding a baby above their heads and chanting while standing on her property.
Yep, I'd call the fucking police too.
Right. The call sounded ridiculous, and I smirked as dispatch gave the details. I arrived at the proper address after driving about 20 minutes along a mountain road. There's not much else up here, and it was extremely quiet. No one walks around out here, and there aren't very many cars driving this late. I walked along a gated driveway. Through a light wooded area, I found the caller's house with two dim lights near the front door. The house was surrounded on three sides by heavy woods.
You and Woods.
I don't like it.
So don't be a cop.
That's right. I felt a little uneasy just looking at the house. I knock on the front door of the house while standing on a large patio. I heard something move to my left, which startled me because it was close. It sounded like a person, something big. I looked to the left and used my flashlight to light up the patio. I didn't see anyone. I continued to knock. I could hear two voices inside the house. I clearly heard a male and a female. This made me feel a little better. I thought I heard someone on the patio, but it must have been someone inside. The female eventually opened the door. She was terrified, almost crying. She asked me to come inside and to close the door. She led me to the living room where I saw a very cheap security monitor, almost like a baby monitor camera set up, with audio and video playing. The camera setup only provided live feed. The camera was positioned to view the front door and patio area where I was just standing. The audio was silent as I watched the monitor for a few seconds. The woman began to explain when I interrupted and asked her where the male was inside the house. I had heard his voice. She looked confused and said she was here alone. I was surprised because I know for a fact I heard a male's voice when I knocked. I asked her several times and initially thought she was lying to me. My partner checked the house and did not find anyone.
Mm.
The woman said she was reading while sitting on the couch when she heard something over the security camera. She looked at the display and saw two people on the patio standing at the front door. She heard knocking at the door and called the police. I looked at the monitor, and although it was low quality, I could see the patio and front door area with decent clarity. As the woman continued to explain, the audio on the monitor went from quiet to extremely loud. We all stopped talking. The caller was shaking. I looked at the monitor but didn't see anyone. Loud audio continued to blast from the speakers. The audio sounded like wind, but it was not windy that night. I mean, I guess on top of the fact that it was on a porch, right?
Right.
Loud audio wind. Okay. I asked the woman, "What is that?" And she said, "It's them." I looked at my partner,
Nope.
who was nervous.
It's like, fuck, I've seen this movie.
Yeah, I'm
We're
currently
about to
nervous.
die.
So the woman gives me her cell phone, stating she took pictures of the monitor showing the two people on her patio. I looked through several low quality pics and didn't see anything. I continue to scroll, and sure enough, I see what looks like two tall figures standing at the door. One of the figures is holding something. The figures look strange, all dark and featureless, in contrast to the video I saw on the monitor. I was in disbelief and thought, oh my God, she's telling the truth. I continued to scroll and saw one figure holding something up over its head. Another picture showed the item at the base of the door with both figures standing near it. I tried to reason, to explain what could have caused these images, but it was pretty apparent that there had been two suspects on her patio. We check outside, walking the property to the tree line. I mentioned the movement on the patio and the male voice from inside the house. My partner asked me to stop talking about it. We finished checking and returned to speak with the caller. She says she will be driving into town and staying at a hotel because she is too scared to stay here tonight. We walk
Wise.
along the driveway back to our cars. My partner jumps into the patrol car and takes off. I laughed, but felt really uneasy standing there in the dark. I leave shortly afterward.
And see, I can just hear the wheels turning in your head. And you're like, that's what you get for living in the woods.
That's what you get for living in the woods. Don't live in the woods.
Oh,
Don't live in the woods.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, it makes you wonder. I mean, it had been so long
Mm-hmm.
but because it took them like 20 minutes to get there, right? And I
Right.
guess it's a patio, not a porch. From in my mind, it was covered. But so like it could have been wind, but God, that would have had to have been very loud wind.
Very loud wind.
But there
Well,
was
the wind
enough
is
time for someone.
The wind is the least weird thing
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that recording.
But who were the people? They could have left. It could have just been people that left. But then when you
What the fuck
add
are they
on to
doing out in the
that,
middle of the woods?
yeah, and you add on to that the male voice coming from inside the house, the movement he saw.
Mhm.
Were they still there? Were they real people? What were they holding? She thought it was a baby, but what were they holding over their head or putting on the floor?
Oh, that's so creepy.
I don't know.
Oh,
So creepy.
oh my God! There's so many movies that I
Yeah.
could make out of this.
Yeah. Okay, I have two more.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Not sure if you guys would want to hear an Asian story, but I thought it's worth sharing. Of fucking course, we want to hear an
Why
Asian story.
wouldn't I want to hear an Asian story?
What are we in this for? Not to get scared? No.
Yeah, come on.
Let's get as creepy as possible. And the way to do that is via Asia.
They got good stories.
They're next level,
what can
man.
I say?
This was told by my dad when I was 12. Even now, when I ask him about the story, he can remember every vivid detail like it just happened last week. My dad was in the police force for 20 years, and when just a rookie, he had to conduct nighttime roadblocks meant to catch drunk drivers. They had done it many times before, and this night started routine enough for them. Wait. They had done it many times before, and this night started routine enough for them. There it is. That makes more sense to me. That was until this Toyota Corolla drove up to them with what looked like a white blanket on its roof, flapping in the wind. They thought it was weird, but did not see anything amiss about it. One of them even joked that this guy was multitasking by drying his laundry and driving home at the same time. The laughs stopped when the lone car came closer and all of them saw what looked like a woman in white lying
bitches in white.
Lying face down on top of the car.
Oh.
The woman.
Oh, that's a fucked up image.
Just wait. The woman seemed to slide like a slug backwards until she disappeared behind the car as it eventually came to a stop in front of them. It took a few minutes for my dad's team to recompose themselves as they stared at each other as if to say, "You guys saw that, right?" The most senior of them finally stepped up and shot the usual questions to the driver. There was a noticeable quiver in his voice as he made conversation, and they asked him to step out of the vehicle. My dad's team inspected the whole vehicle, including the boot, and found nothing strange in it. The driver was a good-looking staff sergeant in the Army who was heading home from a company event earlier that night and admitted to having a few cans of beer. He said that he laid down in his bunk to sleep it off, hence why he was driving home at that time. It was 4 a.m. He passed their sobriety test, and they started to ask him if he saw anything weird during his drive. Initially, he said no, but after more questioning, he mentioned that he had to swerve to avoid what looked like a bird that was flying upside down. It was spooky, but didn't think that it was a detail worth sharing with police officers. Probably because he was like, they're definitely going to think I'm drunk if I said I saw an upside-down bird fly.
I saw this upside-down bird.
He
I
had
to
to
swerve to miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The senior then told the guy to chill out at a 24-hour coffee shop before heading home. The locals believe that if a malevolent spirit follows you, making a pit stop confuses them so they can't set up shop in your house. After some confusion of his own, the driver finally caught on and nodded in agreement. After the guy leaves, they call into the station and cut the night short. Never knew what happened to the driver. Hope he's all right.
I keep focusing on the fact that if I had seen this and the cops were asking me, what? I'd be like, it, I just don't know what kind of car it was. I'd be like, she was on top of this car. What kind of car? I don't know.
I
It
don't
was a car.
know.
What was it? A sedan? Was it a sedan or a truck? I
It
don't
was a
know.
car
It was a vehicle.
of some sort.
And
That's true.
I may not be able to tell cars apart, but I know what a person looks like and that they usually shouldn't be on top of what a car is.
It's true. The idea, like that visual too of
Oh, it's creepy.
sliding off the back like
Oh,
a
the
slug,
flapping like blanket or whatever that turns out
thinking
to
it's a
be
sheet, and then it's a
a
woman.
woman.
Ugh, so creepy. Well, and there's so much lore around, women hunting certain men and stuff like that.
Well, and there's so much lore around haunted roads.
Hmm.
There's been haunted roads as long as there have been roads.
Well, and too, it makes you wonder, like, I mean, was the ghost just hitching a ride? Was she after him? I mean, it seems like if she's holding on to this particular car, she's following him.
Well, yeah.
And just like, oh God, it's just on top of the car. Like, what?
Maybe he fell asleep in his bunker.
I made you yawn, I'm
No,
sorry.
you're making me yawn. Just the idea of falling asleep in a bunker. Like, maybe he fell asleep in this bunker and there was a ghost that's like hanging out going, hey, soldier. And like, just kind of, maybe just like the cut of his jib and wanted to
Right.
follow him
Follow him
home.
home. Or maybe, I mean, there's no telling why it was there
Oh.
or how long that she had been with him.
Yeah, and maybe this was the first time someone else had
Right.
seen it. But it sounds like if the upside down bird was somehow like
Connected.
connected, or like maybe what she looked like to him.
Right. And then it was like,
maybe
this one. I'm going to go with this one.
It's like, this looks like a good victim.
And
'cause
then
maybe not a lot of people on that stretch of road that time of night. So she's like, oh, cool, you.
funsies.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's like, then he goes to a coffee shop and she's like, well, fuck. Now he's at a coffee shop. I can't do shit.
Fuck, he's at a
Now I
coffee
can't
shop.
follow him. He's at a coffee shop and I'm all confused.
It's like, goddamn it.
Does he live at the coffee
Why do you
shop?
stop?
Then does she stay at the coffee shop? Does
Oh,
she go back?
God.
I don't know. I don't know.
just thought of a story that happened to me when I was a teenager, and I'm gonna have to. It's a long one, so I'll have to tell it another one. But at some point, remind me to tell you about
Okay.
the white truck.
Tell me about the white truck now. Michael,
There's a lot.
tell
Okay,
me.
the short version is like some friends of mine. My first friend who was able to drive among us, like he had a truck, and we all loaded up into it one night to go to an away game,
Mhm.
and which is about 45 minutes, 30,
Mhm.
45 minutes from where we lived. And is out in the country. So on the way back, we totally fucking got lost. And we like stopped at an IHOP for like a late dinner
Right.
and after
As
the
you do.
game. And then we decided to head back, and we thought we were taking a shortcut, and or whatever. I don't know if we just got fucking lost, and we
Yeah.
wound up on some goddamn back roads that were like becoming less and less civilized looking the more the deeper we went, to the point where it was like, oh, wow, okay, it's gone from several lanes to one lane or two
Right,
lanes,
2
and
lanes, yeah.
now it's gravel with
Uh-huh.
ditches on either side. And we were looking for, we were basically, this is way
Once
before
you hit gravel, you turn around.
yeah, well, and we did, but we just were trying to find, and we were so lost. Our only option, this is like long before GPS or cell phones,
Right.
was to just kind of head in the direction of the light pollution that seemed to suggest a city. So we're like, well, clearly if we go that direction, that'll take us back to where the highway is, because that looks like, I mean, there's something
There's
out
light.
there. And so we're kind of going that way, but the only way through to that area was like an area of deep ass woods, and which we didn't know. And we're like, okay, and a fucking truck out of nowhere just kind of starts following us. Like there was no one else on this road for like a while. We didn't
Yeah.
run into anyone else. And by now it's probably like 11 at night, midnight or whatever. It's probably maybe even later than that. And so here we are, a bunch of fucking 16-year-old kids. We want to get home because it's pretty much past curfew
Right.
at that point. But we're like, ah. And so we're freaking out that these headlights are behind us, because like, where did that fucking come from? Okay, that's
Mhm.
weird. And they gained on us real fucking quick.
Yeah.
And we sped up because we were like, okay, this is freaking us out. We're lost. So we weren't going slow anyway.
Yeah.
And this fucking car ganged on us. It turned out to be a white truck. And it just kind of, it was behind us, and it wasn't doing anything aggressive necessarily. It was just really close to us,
Mhm.
and it wouldn't pass. Like we tried, at some point we asked our friend who was driving, like, just pull over and let them pass. And it wouldn't pass. It would
Yeah.
stay on us. He didn't stop when he pulled over. He just
Like
kind of pulled
slow
over the
down.
shoulder.
Yeah.
And it would stay. It would just kind of back off a little bit, drift back, and then we'd get back and it would get on our tail again. So we're like, okay, someone's fucking with us. And it finally became something of a chase where at the last minute, I'm telling the shortest version of the story I know. The last minute we decided, or rather the driver decided to just make a fucking turn, like almost a fucking truck flipping turn down this road that just came up on us. And he did. And, the truck fucking disappeared. Like excuse me, that's the detail. So we had to turn because there was a dead end coming in front of us. And we're like, oh, okay, we've got to turn. But we didn't know it because there was no fucking signs.
Right.
And there was just this big fucking, this post.
End of road
post, with a little yellow and black slashes across it or whatever that's called. And it's like, fuck. And so we just
it's a caution. This is the end of the road.
Pretty much. And the only option was like this driveway. And that looked like it went onto someone else's property, and it kind of dipped down, almost like a, not a ditch, but it was definitely like a thing that went over a ravine. And so we just kind of we thought we were gonna fucking die. And he makes this turn and like has to slam on the brakes and does this kind of Tokyo drift kind of thing on this gravel road, this drive, and instantly the truck was no longer behind us. And they had been on our ass, and there was no way we did not turn. Like, he slammed on the brakes as he was turning, right? So he basically just stopped in this drive right off the road.
Oh my gosh.
And the truck was fucking gone. And there was nowhere for them to have gone on ahead.
Yeah.
Because they're, like less than a, block up the road, it looked like there was the fucking giant barricade.
Right.
So we're like, what the fuck just happened? So we turned around and we got the fuck out of there as quickly as we could, and we wound up finding our way back to the main highway. But I mean, that was really fucking freaky.
That car is a bitch in white.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So I do recognize white trucks.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. I bet you do.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry, that just made me think of that. I was like, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that in years.
So creepy.
My first away game I went to. I was 16 years old.
In a phantom car.
Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder too, what's the point of it? Was it trying to get you guys to run through the
and of course, and there's always maybe a side of the story I don't know, is that truck, like the Batmobile, like it had maybe that barricade was really a secret passageway.
Right. It just went
into the remote control for it, and they were like, and they just like to fuck with people. That'd be really funny. But no idea what happened.
Wow.
But there were 3 of us in that car, in that truck that night, and we all saw that, and we're like, we were free. Like, where the fuck did it go? And like, we wanted to get Jason, the driver, wanted to get out and like look, and I was like, no, I don't want to look. Just fucking drive up and just see if there's maybe another road they turned down right before the barricade. Nothing. Trees and ditch on either side.
Don't get out.
The only place to turn before the dead end was where we turned, and yeah.
So creepy. Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
All right, it's all right. Last one.
Okay.
Years ago, my uncle told us about a woman who would call the police station just about every night, claiming that fairies or elves were breaking into her house and stealing her food.
Grandma?
As is custom, every time she calls, they sent a unit to check on her. My uncle gets it about 2 to 3 times per week. Every night, they stop by her house and reassure her that no one has broken in and calm her down. One night, when he gets to the house, she has poured powdered sugar all over the floor to record their tracks. And my uncle says he literally has to do a double take. All over the floor of her kitchen are these little tracks, tiny like nothing he's ever seen before. His partner starts taking photos and trying to figure it out. A few other officers come in, as most of them have gotten the call to her house too and want to see it. 10 police officers, all completely baffled as to what these weird little prints are. Turns out, a possum had babies, and they were sneaking into her kitchen for warmth or food. The prints look so foreign because most of the time baby possums are carried by their mother, not running around. 7 are rounded up and released in a less residential area.
That's not how I wanted that story to end.
I know.
I wanted that story to end with this woman like making little shoes, and she's like, look at the trap.
She may have. You never know. If she's calling every night, she may have.
She had the hots for one of the officers, and she was like, "Could you send Officer Dan?
Send me Dan.
Tell that nice boy Officer Dan that the fairies are back."
Yeah. The fairies. Oh, the brownies are here. Oh, the brownies.
Oh, the brownies. The
Yeah.
Clearies.
The Clearies, yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's so great.
Yeah,
That's
so those
so
are
great.
just, you know, a
Just
bunch
a
of different
smattering.
stories.
We could revisit this theme later on and
I
do
know.
yet still more.
I know.
Law Enforcement Tales Part 2.
Part 2, or firefighter tales, or nurse tales, or
yeah. Well, we did ask for the nurse
Morgue
tales,
tales.
and people have been sending those into the
That's true.
Ghosticles, which has been pretty fucking awesome.
I know. They're so good. They're so good. So that is mine for this week.
That is amazing.
I dove in and just copied and pasted everything.
I'm going to go dive into the bathroom.
All right, that sounds gross.
And then I'm going to hit you with my weirdest fuck story when we come back.
I'm super excited.
I can't wait.
Okay, we're back.
Yay.
All right.
All right.
Tell me, what is your story?
Well, it's a complicated and very weird story, and there's going to be a lot of what and a lot of what and a lot of what.
I'm excited.
Shout out to the YouTuber Bob Gimlin. I have been following him for a little while now, and I love his stuff. He focuses mostly on Bigfoot type things, and from a very scientific, very he's a really good presenter. Again, he's very natural. He's just kind of like, this is my findings, or here's my opinion, and it's a learned opinion. So I'm very impressed with his work. I myself am on the fence.
Yeah, I was like, learned about Bigfoot?
Well, not just about Bigfoot, but about primatology and just all the disciplines that would. He seems to know a lot about all the various disciplines that would have to come into play to convince people that there's such a thing as an undiscovered North American primate. And so it's not just like, I think this Bigfoot, it's not some
the Squatch.
Yeah, it's not that.
Okay.
It's very intelligent. And so I myself am on the fence about the existence of things like that, but I do find them good stories, and I'm maybe a little more sympathetic to the view that they may exist because of Bob Gimlin. So check him out if you haven't already. The YouTube channel is really cool. There's a lot of cool original artwork that he uses when telling his stories, so I love it. And this is how I learned about it. So I did mention that I might tell this story when we were doing the Dennis Nilsson, not Dennis Dilton Nilsson, excuse me, the Dennis Martin disappearance story. That was a little boy that disappeared in the Rockies.
Yes.
And with all sorts of weird things going on at the same, like a lot of weird, uncanny things about that disappearance. Well, and I'd alluded to like a weird string of incidences that happened in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania in the 70s. And so I decided it was time to tell that story. I'm calling this story, wait, we're what now? So, to begin.
Yes.
Now, the Amazon algorithm may lump confidently all paranormal phenomenon into one like targeted reading list for your recommendation, and which drives me fucking crazy. Yeah. But back in the day, people who studied things outside the norm paradoxically tended to stay in their lane. For good reason. These were fledgling disciplines struggling for respectability alongside titans like astrophysics and neurochemistry. In fact, from a PR standpoint, it often behooved people involved in these fields to dismiss each other as quacks.
Right.
Just to be like, no, we're not. It's like college-affiliated parapsychologists tended to roll their eyes at storefront psychics. Ghost hunters bemoaned the onslaught of self-possessed demonologists.
That's all because they just wanted the most donations.
Well. Alternative archaeologists face-palmed when someone brought up Atlantis. Cryptozoologists steered clear of ufologists. Ufologists, people that study UFOs. It sounds funny, but it's pronounced ufology.
It makes me think of Eufaula, which is a city in Oklahoma.
And ufologists, prone to vicious infighting and long thought the wackiest of the lot, seldom concerned themselves with Bigfoot lore. There were naturally researchers who poked their heads into neighboring fields every now and again, but these were more the exception than the rule. Stan Gordon never intended to be one of these exceptions. He'd assembled the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group in 1969 with the express purpose of investigating a then 4-year-old UFO crash. He and his team wanted answers about the bright burning object seen crash landing in the forests of Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, the night of December 9th, 1965. The incident, referred to in such circles as Pennsylvania's Roswell, started with a craft witnessed in flight by people as far north as Ontario, Canada. Grass fires sparked by burning debris were reported all over rural Michigan. Sonic booms rattled the residents of Pittsburgh, just 30 miles southeast of Kecksburg, where the
Let me guess. It was a weather balloon?
where the craft was said to have finally tumbled to Earth. An enormous thump, odd vibrations, and wisps of blue smoke rising from the trees startled the townfolk of Kecksburg, who came out in force to see what the fuss was about and found the area sealed off by state police.
Hmm.
Now, Air Force officials swooped down and conducted a thorough search of the area, but claimed to come up short, ultimately attributing the phenomenon to a meteor.
Meteor. That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. All right.
Civilian witnesses, though, told a very different story. They'd seen authorities hauling a large, acorn shaped craft from the scene, along with a slew of covered objects in unmarked flatbed trucks. Along the
It was the
craft's
meteor.
well, along the craft's rim were what were appeared to be etchings like hieroglyphs that supposedly glowed white. So these weren't meteors. I mean, these were like somebody saw them haul this fucking thing onto the back of a flatbed truck and cover it,
Yeah.
and a lot of people did, not just one or two. Um, Officials from the Air Force, the U.S. Army, and other unknown organizations could be seen wandering through the woods for weeks afterwards. In fact, they lingered in and around the supposed crash site for years.
What?
Which is all to say, Stan Gordon and his team had enough on their minds without bringing Sasquatch into the mix. He and the Westmoreland UFO Study Group were more concerned with reports of men in civilian clothing paying teenagers to mislead would-be gawkers away from the site. They were concerned about so many Kecksburg residents insisting nothing noteworthy had happened, though they acknowledged the presence of the military. They were concerned about witnesses getting harassed by the sinister men in black. They
Mm.
had no clue this would lead them into cryptid territory. In hindsight, it should have come as no surprise when, in the early 70s, their hotline was flooded with calls from local law enforcement. All manner of Fortean things were plaguing the good people of Kecksburg. Complaints of a loud thumping noise emanating from the ground left police scratching their heads. Stan and his team looked into it and concluded seismic activity couldn't be ruled out, but they didn't really have an answer for what the hell was causing this thing. But it happened enough that people were calling,
Right.
going, "What the fuck is coming from underneath, our
Yeah.
house or underneath this patch of ground or whatever?" It was driving them fucking crazy. Before long, though, things got more intense and a hell of a lot weirder. The Superior Mobile Home Court became something of a hotspot for Bigfoot in the wake of the UFO crash, so much so that the Westmoreland group felt compelled to look into it, even though this was, strictly speaking, outside their expertise. Normally,
But
they'd
they
have.
were there.
Well, they were there. No one else was going to look into it.
Right.
Normally, they'd have left this to the cryptozoologist, but a woman who claimed to have seen a hairy two-legged behemoth staring at her through the bedroom window phoned Gordon a few days after the incident to say an odd-looking fellow in a dark business suit was now puttering around the outside of her trailer in broad daylight. His Camaro had Ohio plates. He'd flashed an ID card that read simply Ohio Research Center or something generic to that effect, no name.
Yeah.
The stranger wandered the court for hours, snapping Polaroids of the ground, often focusing on random patches of grass where no tracks were visible. The woman noticed he seemed befuddled by his own camera, like he barely knew how to use it. Another disturbing detail, he spoke and moved like a child, unsure on
Hmm.
his feet and answering in broken sentences when approached. Some neighborhood boys sidled up and asked to see the Polaroids he'd taken of the Bigfoot tracks. He obliged them, but when they commented on how one in particular had come out very clear, the man snatched it from their hands, crumpled it up like a candy bar wrapper, shoved it in his pocket, and cackled at them. Just fucking
Weird.
weird. An adult nearby was mowing his yard and had been keeping an eye on this guy for a while. He didn't like the cut of his jib, saw his interaction with the boys, and angrily shouted at him that he was going to call the fucking police, at which point the mystery man dove into his Camaro like a crazy person and sped away so fast bystanders would later tell police they feared the car would roll.
Wow. In my
Gordon.
movie,
Uh-huh.
I cast him as Crispin Glover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Peter Stormare. Now, Stan Gordon passed the Ohio-plated Camaro en route to the scene. The odd man and his antics were well known by the Westmoreland UFO Study Group by then. He and others like him had been hanging around for the better part of a decade, ever since the UFO crash. One such individual contacted Gordon in 1975, claiming to be with something called the, quote, Bureau of Sport Fisheries Bird and Mammals Lab, end quote. Now, naive about the MIB and at the time, and happy that the Westmoreland Group's efforts were generating buzz with someone in a position of authority, Gordon was happy to send reams of relevant files, photos, samples, etc. to a DC address the man had provided him over the phone. He never heard back.
Yeah.
Come to find out, no such organization existed. Where he had sent this stuff and what became of it, he never found
Oh,
out.
wow.
The trailer park incident, though, was the first time, to Gordon's knowledge, one of these spurious MIB-looking fellows seemed interested in a Bigfoot sighting, and the area was no stranger to such things. A few years earlier, in 1972, an elderly woman living alone in Superior Mobile Home Court awoke to the sound of her small dog pitching a fit. Someone or something was prowling around outside. She peered through the bedroom window to see a large bipedal creature attempting to hoist the home from its moorings. The beast succeeded in hefting the double wide about a foot off center of its cinder blocks before it gave up and stalked off into the woods. Upon investigating, it was found the mobile home had indeed been moved, yet the combined strength of two men could not replicate the stunt.
Wow.
That same year...
And that's a double wide.
It's a double wide.
That's it.
That same year, two women out driving at the edge of a forest preserve in Derry, which is a few miles near this, is part of the Westmoreland County.
Okay.
They reported seeing a massive hairy creature walking on two legs along the side of the road. It's a typical Bigfoot sighting for the most part, with one key difference. The creature, they said, and this was weird, and they felt crazy saying it, was holding a glowing white orb in its hand.
Oh.
It ducked into the woods after it realized... It seemed to duck into the woods after it realized it saw them, or they saw him. And moments later, the women saw a thin beam of light shoot up from the trees toward a small red dot in the sky. Neither of them had noticed before, and then it vanished. Derry Township is about 10 miles from the alleged UFO crash site that happened years earlier. In October of 1973, 4 separate groups, totaling about 15 people in all, independently reported a bright red sphere about the size of a barn suspended roughly 100 feet off the ground. George Kowalczyk was among them, but his story played out differently than the others. In an interview with investigator Dr. Paul Johnson with the Westmoreland Study Group, Kowalczyk told a bizarre and hair-raising tale. He'd been driving his identical twin nephews home from a football game when all three witnessed the giant red sphere float down out of the sky. George gunned it to his parents' house nearby, where he intended to drop the twins off so he could go back for a better look. The 10-year-olds begged him to let them tag along. Despite their grandmother's misgivings, George relented. The trio piled back into his pickup truck and followed a dirt road on his dad's property toward the sphere, which by now had settled over the woods adjacent to an empty field.
Woods.
Obscured by a thin row of trees, only the object's rusty orange glow was visible as George and the twins got out and walked up to a barbed wire fence bordering the property. One of the boys was thrilled at the prospect of meeting an ET. The other wanted to fucking go.
Yeah.
As they trudged to higher ground, hoping to get a better view, one of the boys told George they could see something lumbering down the fence line toward them through the field. Moving slowly in long, deliberate strides, the hunchback creature was twice the height of the railroad ties that served as fence posts. To make matters more bizarre, it was accompanied by what George described as a baby-like cry. Soon enough, they could see not one creature, but two. A much smaller figure of similar build was trailing behind its hulking companion. The pair followed an odd pattern. The larger figure would walk up to a fence post, let out a soft cry, then wait for the smaller one to reach the fence post behind it. The smaller creature would reply with what Kowalczyk described as a kind of muted gurgle. George got his rifle and a handful of tracer rounds from the truck.
He's just teaching how to cry properly.
It's fucking weird, right?
It's not how you do it. It's no.
So close. It's so cute to think of that. Now, George got his rifle and a handful of tracer rounds out of the truck. Tracer rounds are not, they're not ballistic rounds. They're like flares.
Right. Gotcha.
And he fired a tracer over the creatures' heads to illuminate them. They stopped and for the first time appeared to acknowledge that they were being watched. As the red projectile, that is the tracer, soared above them, their eyes, he said, shone green like a cat's. This was enough to send one of the twins sprinting back down the dirt road to Grandma's house, over a mile away. The other boys screamed for George to shoot the creatures. George fired another tracer over their heads. The larger one calmly placed a hand on the smaller one's shoulder. The smaller then turned and made a beeline for the trees toward the giant red sphere, while the larger stayed put. Finding himself stared down by this menacing figure, George loaded 3 normal rounds and fired off 3 shots in rapid succession. All apparently hit their mark, though the sound resembled what George would later compare to, quote, shooting a lake.
Huh.
The creature flinched, but stood its ground. At a loss, and no doubt frightened out of his goddamn mind, George grabbed his remaining nephew, dove into the truck, and got the hell out of Dodge. He immediately called the police, but by the time authorities arrived on scene, neither the creatures nor the red sphere could be found, though the cops did note a dull orange glow, quote, hanging in the air.
Woo.
The twin, who ran home, you'll be glad to know, made it there safely,
Good for him.
but suffered something of a nervous breakdown shortly after. The poor boy was plagued for months by visions of catastrophes. He dreamt about explosions, he dreamt about buildings toppling, cities on fire, etc. The incident had clearly taken some kind of a profound psychological toll on him, and it's not uncommon for certain people who see UFOs or weird shit to have this, and it's not the last we'll hear of someone that has a similar experience.
Okay.
Having interviewed no less than a dozen witnesses who'd seen the red sphere that night, Dr. Johnson with the Westmoreland Group found George Kowalczyk's story credible. The man, he insisted, wasn't making this up, amazing as it seemed. He and his nephews had been the only ones to see any creatures associated with the object, but their claim checked out. They would have been the only witnesses in a position to have done so, it seems. Bear in mind, Johnson was a seasoned investigator who dealt with more than his share of crackpots in his line of work. That George struck him as a reliable witness, despite the story being so bizarre, should carry some weight, I think.
Yeah.
Dr. Johnson, Stan Gordon, and the other members of the Westmoreland Group began, albeit reluctantly, to accept the likelihood of there being some connection between the UFO phenomenon and the deluge of Bigfoot sightings in the area. As I've said, cryptozoologists and ufologists make for strange bedfellows, certainly back then. Most researchers dedicated to proving the existence of an undiscovered primate in the forests of North America would bristle at the notion of anyone coming in and suggesting Bigfoot was from another world. But reports like the ones coming out of Westmoreland defied easy categorization. Someone had to look into them. A motorist,
so weird.
for example, claimed to have hit a Sasquatch with his car head-on. His sedan sustained quite a bit of damage, but the creature, he said, blinked out of existence upon impact.
What?
And even if it hadn't done that, this wouldn't explain the claw marks that emerged on his trunk afterwards. Because the trunk had played no part in the accident. He'd hit it with his hood or with the front.
Right.
Not far from Derry, a fly fisherman in, yes, Sleepy Hollow, claimed to have heard a shrill cry upstream while he was angling for bass after dark one night. He turned to see a large figure thrashing through the water toward him, silhouetted against the night sky, swinging its long arms overhead. Wanting no part of this, the man got into his car. As he pulled away, the creature somehow closed the significant gap between them in a matter of seconds and stuck its head through the open driver's side window. In one of the most unique descriptions of a Bigfoot on record, the man claims the creature was covered in mange, with only patches of fur here and there. Protruding gums imply that it once had teeth, but these were gone. The hair on the top of its head was long and kind of stuck to its head, like matted. And strangest of all, given the circumstances, the beast gave off no discernible scent.
Oh, that is weird.
The man slammed down the horn. The creature recoiled, but remained visible in the rearview mirror as the man drove away. One final detail, if all this weren't fucking weird enough, the goddamn thing waved at him as he was leaving. It's like, hey, bye.
I like to think that it's just these really confused aliens that are like, oh, this is a big furry creature. They'll love that.
And one of them just couldn't quite get the disguise right.
Right.
So reluctant as they might have been initially about getting involved with this kind of high strangeness, Dan Gordon and the Westmoreland Group couldn't ignore the probable connection. The deeper they went, however, the more their efforts were thwarted. Enter the suit-wearing stranger lurking around Superior Mobile Home Court with his Polaroid camera. Enter the phone call from the Earthsat's Bureau of Sports Fisheries, Birds, and Mammal Lab. Enter, too, a researcher named Barry Clark, who joined the Westmoreland UFO Study Group, blissfully unaware this kind of research would run him afoul of things beyond his understanding. Clark hailed from Derry, where the Bigfoot sightings had grown so prevalent that just about everyone in town was either related to or knew someone who had had a credible encounter. There was something going on, and Barry Clark intended to get to the bottom of it. A particular interest for him was a report from the Bell family farm, not to be confused with the Bells of Tennessee.
Right.
For 3 consecutive nights, the Bells had seen what they referred to as a, quote, big star appear on the horizon around 10 at night. It changed colors from red to silver and back again, flickering at different frequencies for several minutes before vanishing. So regular had the phenomenon become that Clark himself had the pleasure of seeing this when he came to investigate. It appeared at 10 on the dot. Clark describes the light as flashing 5 times like the arc from a welder over the course of about 10 minutes. So far, this was fairly standard behavior. As the Bells watched alongside Clark from the safety of their front porch, however, they noticed the pulsing red-silver object drawing smaller, white points of light into itself, each one of which would take on the color of the larger, the closer they got. This was new. Suddenly, the object's glow intensified. Much to the shock and terror of everyone watching this, it started to come in for a landing.
Oh, no.
The Bells fled in terror, Barry not far behind them. Shaken, Barry Clark resigned from the Westmoreland UFO study group the next day.
Wow.
He basically said, like, I'm of the opinion now that there's just some shit we shouldn't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what that is. Alas, however, this wasn't the end of it for him. Several days later, Barry drove a short distance along familiar roads to a friend's house. Upon arriving, he realized quite a bit more time had passed than would have been necessary to get there. Several hours, in fact.
Yeah.
He'd set out in broad daylight and arrived after dark. Whereas the drive should have only been a matter of minutes. And search his memory though he might, he could recall absolutely nothing unusual about the drive itself. Prior to his encounter at Bell Farm, it should be noted, he never experienced anything out of the ordinary in his life. But these episodes of missing time persisted for the rest of his life.
Wow.
When his grandson, who was born in the 80s, turned 10, the boy insisted that shadow people would come down through a hole in the ceiling above his bed every night and try to talk to him.
Woo!
So vivid were these quote-unquote nightmares, the poor boy went without sleep for days on end. Stan Gordon has since authored a number of books about his investigations into UFOs, but before we dismiss the high strangeness of early 70s Westmoreland, Pennsylvania as pure invention, it's worth bearing in mind that nothing else in Gordon's work comes close to what his group documented in their founding years. The phenomenon was anomalous in every sense of the word, and Gordon, though he has investigated UFOs and sometimes Bigfoot ever since, has never encountered a case quite like the Westmoreland decade ever again.
Huh.
Fucking weird.
It is weird.
Yeah. All the shit. Like, it's just the boys having the nightmares, the young kids when they turn 10, like the 10-year-old twins and one of them having those really nightmares of like world end type shit.
Yeah.
And the 10-year-old grandson of the guy who experienced missing time after seeing a UFO in Derry. Like, and it's called Derry, for God's sake. It's the same. True. It's the name of the town from it.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah. That's bizarre, and you know, and Bob Giblin, the YouTuber that I got the story from, says himself, like, he's like, I do not buy the UFO Bigfoot connection, but I also don't buy that all this shit's just made up. There is some connection here that we just can't understand. He's like, I don't think Bigfoot are alien,
right?
But what the fuck are they then, or what's going on? You know, and it all goes back to, if we talk about things like Mothman and what you know, John Keel and these others believe, is that like UFOs aren't necessarily from another world, that there's something else going on altogether. Like it's some kind of earthly phenomenon that's disguising itself in some kind of way,
right?
And or maybe it's just the only way our mind can apprehend it is to give it some bizarre shape that resembles some archetypal feature in our own minds that we've forgotten, and who knows? But it's bizarre. Shit like that just fascinates me.
Obviously, the aliens took Bigfoot and are just putting them back periodically.
Maybe.
And that's what's happening.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I really like the idea, though, that they're like, we'll find something that you know they'll like, and they happened upon a Bigfoot, right? This is my movie, and they're like, this thing is huge, but furry. It's intimidating, but people are always obsessed about it. If we go down and we dress like this, we present ourselves like this, everybody's gonna love us.
In my movie, and my movie's a comedy.
Yeah, mine is obviously.
Yeah, well. In my movie, the aliens come down and they make first contact with the Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot just decides to like. They've been mistaken for like the dominant species,
right?
And they just play along.
Oh, I like that too. Yeah, that's
so
good.
Like for like decades, maybe even centuries now, Sasquatch have been like having to keep up the charade that they're kind of the ones in charge. So anytime the aliens come down, they talk to them, and we're over here going, "What the fuck is that?" And meantime, they're having meetings,
Right.
brunching with the
With the
aliens, going, "Yeah,
aliens.
yeah, no, we've taken all those things under advisement." The aliens, well,
Hmm.
why haven't you done anything about like nuclear weapons? We're working on it.
We're working on it. We're working on it. What are nuclear weapons? They don't have those in the forest.
But I don't know. I think it's in my mind, not my movie, but in my opinion, I think the connection has something to do with anomalous phenomenon.
That's hard to say.
Anomalous. It's fun to say. It's a good warm
Anomalous
up.
phenomenon.
Anomalous phenomenon. Anomalous
Hmm.
phenomenon.
All right.
Anomalous phenomenon. Well, okay, it's not that easy, but it's all, they all seem to be related. Like Keel was of the opinion that his famous thing was belief is the enemy. So it's like, I don't believe anything, but I do think that maybe it's worth considering that all this phenomenon is smokescreen, that there is some older intelligence that's
It's a
indigenous,
distraction.
that just puts out like, give them Bigfoot,
Yeah.
give them UFOs. Oh, I know. It's like they're this, whatever this is, whatever entity or entities, or like whatever prime intelligence or supernatural intelligence is responsible, is like sitting in a writer's room going, I know, let's do Bigfoot and aliens.
UFOs. They'll never know what to do.
Yeah, it'll be hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, who knows?
And they think I can't wait till they hear our podcast.
And they'll
It's
be
hilarious.
like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe that's why they do it.
It's probably why
Our
they do it.
podcast is a justification for everything they've done, because one day they wanted to hear two voice actors in Texas, known for doing video games and anime, tell their story.
That's right. And we did. And we did.
Oh, we're so going to
So
get visited by Men in Black.
You can now tell us what actually happened.
Yeah.
Just, send it in an email. It'll be fine. We take all kinds of emails, whether it's how the aliens and Bigfoot are related.
Isn't it weird, though, that the phenomenon, when it happens, and this goes for ghostly phenomenon too, it tends to follow the pattern of a dream. And there's a school of thought. Oh, I hadn't said that in a while.
No, you haven't. Yeah. Now that's what you say when you say it. Oh, I haven't said that in a while.
Yeah. We have another T-shirt idea.
Yeah.
But there's a school of thought in among psychologists, psychiatry, that says, like, as far as dream interpretation goes, is that if you have a dream, the key to interpreting it is to put yourself in the shoes of every element of that dream and ask what your purpose is.
Right.
So, like, if a man is dreaming, I think an example that was given was there was a guy, like, and he kept dreaming that he was just stuck in an elevator with this goldfish in a bag. And he just kind of like, okay. And so the psychologist, it was a disturbing dream, but he couldn't quite pinpoint why, but he kept having it. And so the psychologist was like, or the analyst was like, well, we should definitely look at that. It's there for a reason. And so the psychologist said, well, like, okay, well, put yourself, what do you feel as you in that dream? Well, I feel this. Okay. Well, what do you feel as the fish? What do you feel as the bag? What do you feel as the water? Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, this kind of narrative emerged that led to a trauma that he was avoiding. Mm-hmm. And so all of which is to say that sometimes these phenomenon take on the kind of just have the denouement of a dream, and maybe the key to, if it is, as I've suggested in the past, equal parts something out here and something in us that's kind of projecting onto it, that's just to give us something to kind of grab onto so that we can comprehend what we're seeing. Maybe the key is to kind of put yourself in those shoes and be like, okay, what am I seeing? Like, what's the story? Like, I am being told a story right now. What is it?
Well, it's usually, for most dreams, it's about yourself, right? So you are represented by everything in the dream,
exactly.
Right? So, like, the poor kid who had all the nightmares, I don't necessarily think that was anything supernatural. I think it was his reaction to what was a very traumatic event for him. Mm-hmm. Seeing that, experiencing that, scared the shit out of him. So much so that he left relative safety with his relatives. That wasn't a pun on purpose.
Doesn't sound like his relative was very safe to be around.
Right. But he left them and ran through the woods to go home.
Down that long dirt road, a mile.
Yeah.
Mile.
That's
and a traumatic experience.
Not knowing if there was anything else like that in there. Just ran, right? Panic, full on panic, ran. Who knows what happened on this way home? Who knows what, his brain told him was happening. And then he gets home and now he has these nightmares. Well, it's all about natural disasters, right? But that is his world. a natural disaster has occurred in his world, and
Yeah.
that's what I think those dreams represent. They represent his world being destroyed because what he thought
Yeah.
was there is no longer
Yeah.
there. So, like, I remember, you know, I had a dream once that um, I think my brother had died,
Mm.
and it was devastating. It was a horrible, horrible nightmare, and I was trying to figure out what it could be about, what it could be about, and it turns out that it's usually when a relationship is changing, and I think
Yeah.
he was moving out of state or something. I can't remember what it was, but that relationship is changing, and so
Mhm.
you're killing not that person, but that relationship. So it's fundamental part of who you are. That relationship is changing. And so the way that your brain deals with this is it kills it, right? It's not him,
It's almost
it's
like
the
the brain's way of
relationship.
saying, see, it's not so bad. You thought he was dead, and he's
Right.
actually just moving.
He's just moving. You're fine. It's just a small change. But it is interesting to, I mean, of course, that's provided that your dreams are not, foretelling or any
Well,
kind of
and
visitation, but
I think they can be both. I think they
yeah.
can be, psychic or foretelling, but also,
Hmm.
I mean, I think because whatever these phenomena are, they have to speak to us through whatever raw material in our brain is already there.
Right. That's
I think
true.
that's what happens. You talk about the dream interpretation, like this boy, and that's a great way to look at it. This boy had this traumatic experience, and so these dreams were kind of a representation of the fact that his world had come tumbling down around him because
Yeah.
he had grown up rather quickly that night.
Yeah.
Um, but if you take that same kind of logic and apply it to the supposedly real situation that George, his uncle
Hmm.
Kowalczyk, was looking at, like, isn't that interesting? Isn't that it's a weird parallel that this being, these two beings, and the younger one, presumably the kid, runs back
Hmm.
toward the spaceship or the mothership, whatever the fuck it was, in very much the same way
Yes, parallel
as
ways.
the boy ran.
Yeah.
And so, like, what is that? It's fascinating to me
What's
that,
the
like,
little creature dream about?
literally the little God only knows what catastrophe looks like to them.
I know.
uh
Probably
yeah.
a bright light flashing over their heads
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
And of course, the implication with the other guy, the Barry Clark guy and his grandson, maybe
Yeah.
something about his experience. He never thought that he'd been abducted. Like, he never. Well, he didn't say he hadn't been, but he never ever openly or publicly ascribed to the belief that he'd been an abductee. He had no memories of
Right.
having been abducted, but there were episodes of lost time, and but an interpretation, if we take everything at face value, is that his grandson was somehow, you know these beings that had taken Barry, and maybe
Hmm.
Barry was just mature enough at the time to have developed subconscious coping mechanisms that allowed him to forget what had happened to him.
Right.
Whereas the boy, being 10, maybe not so much, and so he was remembering these things coming for him, and so maybe there was something about that family line or what. I mean,
Right. Who knows?
it's really bizarre, and what's so challenging and at the same time so fascinating about this stuff is, like, how much of it is unconsciously projected onto something that's real, so that
Hmm.
now we're not really seeing the true character of whatever is happening, because it's kind of skewed by whatever blinders we bring to it. That's not to say that nothing is happening, but that
Right.
we tend, as human beings, to kind of make our own story out of what we're seeing, just because it's the only way our brain knows how to make sense of it.
Hmm.
And it just adds a lot of detail, or maybe subtracts detail, in a way that makes it impossible to get at what actually was the thing
Right.
that happened.
Right.
So how do you even begin to unravel it? The reason I'm so attracted to this kind of phenomenon, because it speaks a lot to how we, as human beings, how little we know about how
Hmm.
we create our own reality.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You
Yeah.
know.
What we're seeing, what we're telling
Hmm.
ourselves, all of that kind
Hmm.
of stuff.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's a
so
good
it's a
story.
good story.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your whole slew of stories.
It was great. It was a lot of fun to do.
Your dispatch board of stories.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening.
Yes.
Check out the website, coolintentions.com, where we have shirts and we have other shit that you might want. I don't know. Links to our Instagram and Twitter's is
Twitter's is where you
um
can go to submit your own story.
yes, ready for Thursdays. Will come our Ghosticles episodes. If you're not
Uh-huh.
checking those out, those are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And is there anything else? I can't think of
I
anything
think
else.
that's everything.
Have you
They should
seen
know.
anything, any good movies recently? Any good recommendations for entertainment?
No, I
Fucking
haven't.
Good
I
Omens.
want to
We
see.
finished it finally. It's
Oh,
so
damn it! I
good.
need to.
It's
Okay,
so good.
I want to watch it.
So, oh
I
my
want to
God,
watch it.
it's so good.
I know I'm gonna love it though. I
It
still have to
is
finish American Gods.
so good. And I have to
I'm so
say,
behind.
reading the book, I mean, I loved the book, but
Same.
Aziraphale was not my favorite character.
Mm.
And Michael Sheen is so good.
Yeah.
He's my favorite character in the show.
Oh, that's fucking
He's
great.
so good. I mean, everybody's amazing. I mean, it's such a strong cast in it, but
Oh,
he in particular just steals my little heart. I
oh,
love
that's
him. I adore him.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I am eager. I haven't seen it yet, so it's not a recommendation so much. It's just like it's a stated purpose. I want to watch Midsummer by the same director that did Hereditary.
Hereditary, right?
Which is really good, and it's getting mixed reviews. But the reviews, I don't think anyone's calling it a bad film. I think people are just being confused by it, and so it sounds like the sort of film that I will fucking love.
Right. Oh, and back to our title. From Inkheart, that movie is with Brendan Fraser. It's extremely enjoyable, and if you have kids, they will love it. It's so basically it's about this guy who has this gift where if he reads something out loud, it comes true. But when he if it comes true, something from the real world goes into the book. So it's like an even exchange,
there's the
right? And so.
quid pro quo.
Yeah, and so then what happens when you read in bad guys? And and there's a lot of really great actors in it. So
that's awesome.
Definitely enjoy them. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So all right, well thank you again,
thank you guys.
And
Thanks for listening.
remember, it's okay to sleep with the lights on.